Think back to the mid-2000s. The bright neon glow of the local mall arcade. The thumping, high-decibel bass rattling the floorboards. The plastic, brightly colored guitar peripherals held tightly in your hands as you stared at a television screen. Your fingers flying across 5 plastic buttons in perfect sync with a fast, scrolling chart of colored notes. Millions of us spent entire summers chasing high scores, matching the rhythm of our favorite rock songs until our muscles memorized every frame of the chart. We look at those plastic toy controllers as harmless relics of a simpler era, a clean piece of consumer electronics built for high schoolhouse parties. But the rhythmic pattern we burned into our nervous systems didn't just exist to clear a digital level. It was a neurological calibration sequence. And if the firmware experiences an unlisted execution error, you realize the plastic buttons aren't registering your inputs. They are harvesting your reflexes. My name is Marcus Kane. In 2006, I worked as a senior hardware diagnostics engineer for a massive arcade amusement manufacturing syndicate that distributed rhythm gaming cabinets to malls and entertainment centers across North America. My division's responsibility was highly specific. We audited defective circuit boards and peripheral returns that had been flagged for unusual electronic behavioral loops. To the outside world, these recalls were routine corporate decisions designed to fix broken fret switches, faulty whammy bar potentiometers, or cracked plastic casing structures. But the hardware anomaly we received in the winter of that year was not a simple mechanical failure. The shipment contained a prototype arcade cabinet assembly recovered from a test location in a quiet, forgotten town in the Midwest. In the official shipping manifests, the unit was cataloged as a standard rhythm simulation motherboard test kit. But within the classified corporate data dumps sent to our basement lab, it was isolated under a single, disturbing internal project title, Project Shredder. The executive board didn't want us to patch an input latency bug. They wanted us to build a physical quarantine around the motherboard. 3 weeks prior, the test cabinet had been installed in an unmonitored suburban mall arcade. The automated network logs flagged a catastrophic code desynchronization. When the game's core loop reached the final song on the highest difficulty tier, the system would lock up. The cabinet's audio processors reported an input frequency that was physically impossible, a localized data transfer rate that exceeded the storage bus limits, drawing enough electrical power from the wall grid to cause the copper wiring inside the laboratory walls to hum and smoke. My job was to run the captured digital audio tracks and input logs from that corrupted machine through a series of forensic waveform isolation matrices to find out what was hijacking the controller signals. We were told to examine the latency. We were told to map the fretboard data arrays, but when we finally processed the low-frequency electrical currents bouncing back from those colored plastic buttons, we didn't just find a broken circuit board. We found a predatory, cybernetic organism that feeds on human muscle tissue and muscle memory. And what is growing inside those old gaming components is the reason why major gaming companies quietly engineered massive hardware redesigns in the late 2000s, permanently phasing out wired controllers under the guise of wireless convenience. The text that follows is the unedited, minute-by-minute log of my final shift at that diagnostic facility. Put on your headphones, turn out your lights, because the game isn't testing your coordination. It is pulling your nervous system directly through the plastic wire. According to my personal technical journals, the true horror of Project Shredder begins when a player manages to maintain a perfect 100% streak for more than 3 minutes on an unlisted track. That is the point where the hardware ceases to be a toy and begins to establish a biological interface with the user's hand. On November 18, 2006, at exactly 3 a.m, we connected the prototype controller to our laboratory's heavy acoustic anechoic monitoring booth. The plastic guitar was wired directly into our diagnostic hardware via fiber optic data feeds to eliminate external noise. I sat in the observation booth, the glowing toxic green monitors casting long, distorted shadows on the concrete walls. I put on my studio headphones and opened the raw data stream. At first, the feed was standard digital noise, a flat green line on the frequency analyzer, accompanied by the classic scrolling note chart on the cabinet's CRT monitor. It was a cold, clinical, mechanical frequency. Then the internal temperature sensors on the plastic controller began to skyrocket. But the plastic wasn't heating up because of an electrical short circuit. The telemetry showed the neck of the controller dropping from room temperature down to a freezing 20 degrees in less than 3 seconds, while the 5 colored plastic fret buttons began to glow with an intense, toxic green luminescent light that cast long, jagged shadows across the polished concrete floor. The internal circuits were frosting over while the device was drawing maximum electrical current from the console. On the audio feed, the standard rock music track suddenly shifted, melting into a sound that made my chest tighten with airless dread. It was a wet, heavy, rhythmic tearing sound. Click, click, stretch, squelch. It sounded exactly like someone dragging a heavy steel hook through raw, wet tendons. The micro switches inside the plastic fretboard picked up a deep, subaudible vibration that caused the concrete floor beneath my desk to visibly shake. Then came the voice. It didn't use the arcade cabinet's built-in speakers. The entity was vibrating the copper filaments inside my headset wires, reversing the electrical current to turn my own headphones into a throat, speaking directly into my ears. The voice was a shifting, layered mosaic of synthetic tones. It sounded like the low-bit sound effects of 100 different retro arcade games, all playing the exact same words in perfect unison, their pitches distorted, layered over a deep, wet, choking rattle. It spoke an ancient, guttural dialect of an unmapped language that had no right to exist inside a modern logic board. I ran the signal through our real-time linguistic decryption matrix, isolating the vocal track from the electronic static. The translation grid slowly filled my monitor with text. The voice said, "The needle of the rhythm has pierced the pattern of the hand. The skin of the controller is thin now. We taste your muscle reflex on the plastic of the buttons. We are climbing up the copper wire to harvest the meat." The audio levels spiked into the red so violently that the frequency monitors shattered their graphical rendering limits, leaving my headphones screaming with a sharp, white-hot tone of feedback. I pulled the headset off, my skin breaking out into a cold, prickling sweat, my breath caught in my throat. The project director immediately ordered the fiber optic lines to be severed, killing the connection to the booth. The security team entered the booth to retrieve the prototype controller. When they pulled the device out and laid it on the stainless steel lab table, the entire team backed away in absolute horror. The plastic body of the guitar wasn't melted or scorched by an explosion. It had been dissolved from the neck outward. The thick, reinforced plastic housing was covered in a thick, dripping, toxic green biological residue that reeked of copper and decaying organic flesh. The neck was pitted and scarred, as if it had been exposed to a powerful biological digestive acid, and sticking out from the melted seams of the green and red fret buttons was a fragment of something physical. It was a collection of small, translucent strands of human muscle tissue, over 6 inches long, twitching violently on the table, their nerve endings reacting directly to the fluorescent lights of the lab. The director didn't hesitate. He ordered the security team to destroy the device with an industrial plasma torch, burning the organic material to a black ash before sealing the remains inside a heavy lead canister. We were forced to sign top-secret non-disclosure updates, our clearance levels locked down under threat of immediate federal prosecution. They told the facility staff it was a peripheral capacitor explosion anomaly. They told us the audio was an electromagnetic loop, but they were lying. 2 weeks later, our department received a raw data package from a residential smart home network hub located in a suburb just 5 miles from our facility. A teenager had vanished from his bedroom. The room had been found completely empty, the window locked from the inside, the gaming console still active on the television screen, flashing with a paused note chart. The data dump included the interior bedroom security camera video and the synchronized audio telemetry from that night. I sat alone in the server room, loading the file onto my terminal. The video was grainy, shot in high-contrast infrared night vision. The time stamp on the screen read 03:33 a.m. The video showed the teenager playing the rhythm game in front of his television. Suddenly, the game's screen panned from its normal colors to a brilliant, toxic green color, illuminating the entire bedroom in an eerie, radioactive glow. The text on the screen didn't say "song paused." The speakers burst into life with a low, vibrating, sub-bass frequency that caused the security camera lens to visibly shake. And then, the video showed a structural anomaly forming right along the plastic wire of the controller. The space directly surrounding the plastic guitar cord wasn't empty air anymore. The infrared light cut through a thick, swirling vortex of black, smoky vapor that seemed to bleed directly out of the controller's dissolved plastic neck. And stretching out of that digital vortex, reaching toward the user's forearm, was an appendage that made my fingers freeze on the keyboard. It was a hand, but it wasn't a human hand. It was a massive, pale, multi-jointed arm made of twisted digital artifacts, bleeding muscle fibers, and thousands of tiny, flashing plastic fret buttons fused into the flesh like teeth. It didn't have skin. It was raw, exposed tissue, moving with a fast, jerky, robotic speed. It hovered inches above the user's wrist, the fingers rapidly twitching in perfect sync with the speed of the song's notes. At that exact second, the audio speakers on my console emitted a sound that made the hair on my arms stand straight up. It was a chorus of human voices screaming inside the data stream, a frantic, breathless wail of pure agony that matched the exact vocal frequencies of every teenager who had gone missing in that county over the last 10 years. The game wasn't just generating a signal. It was pulling acoustic imprints from the lost, using their muscle memory to stabilize the frequency. The hand clamped around the user's wrist. The video feed instantly went to absolute black static. The data packet ended there. The next morning, our facility was cleared out by government officials. They seized our hard drives, wiped the primary database, and permanently closed Project Shredder. The official records state the neighborhood experienced a localized electrical grid failure due to a lightning strike. The inventory lots holding those specific prototype motherboards were cleared out and crushed under military supervision. I left the manufacturing syndicate that month. I live in an old, unmapped cabin now, far away from the suburbs, deep in the wilderness where there are no electronics, no gaming consoles, and no controllers. I don't play video games anymore. I have a basic, mechanical acoustic guitar that operates on physical wooden vibrations, and I keep my hands completely clear of any plastic interfaces. Because last night, a minor localized storm passed over my ridge. The power grid flickered, the digital display on my old shortwave radio turning a pale, toxic green color for less than 3 seconds. And as the display shifted, the mechanical strings on my old acoustic guitar began to buzz. Not their normal musical tone, but a frantic, irregular electronic drone, matching the exact speed of the 2004 rhythm charts. I held the wooden body of the guitar to my ear, and through the vibrating wood, I heard a wet, automated whisper calling out my name from the sound hole. "Marcus," the whisper said, a cold, synthetic rasp that made my blood instantly turn to ice. "The chart is loading over your roof. The speed is updated. We are harvesting your muscle memory tonight." Humanity has spent the last few decades building a massive, complex network of toys, games, and peripherals, believing that our plastic buttons and high scores make us the masters of the entertainment we control. But we didn't realize that the electronic patterns we burn into our brains are just channels cut into the flesh of a living organism. A vast, underground entity that is slowly learning to read our reflexes from the inside out. Company has crushed the prototype motherboards of